You'll hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening. I am Trustee Melissa Augustine. I am the zoning liaison, and I'm the person who kind of orchestrated this endeavor. Do you need help, Stephanie?
No, it's muted, but I'm just turning my volume down.
Okay, it's the speaker on your computer. So you might want to hit that. The reason that I put this together is because the comprehensive plan audit results came back to us, and one of the recommendations that OHM planning gave us, I will read to you. And it says, number 2, identified lands for conservation. Maintaining the rural character of Hinckley Township was a common theme during the creation of the 2015 plan and the audit process. 2 questions in the community survey spoke to this topic. The first asked residents to define rural as it relates to the character of Hinckley Township. Common responses included words like spacious, natural, serene, and peaceful. Additionally, the community was asked directly about the idea of a green space levy to assist the township in identifying lands to preserve and conserve. The 2015 comprehensive plan identified lands in the future land use map for preservation or as limited residential development. The 2015 plan also mapped environmentally sensitive areas by outlining land within the 100-year floodplain, slopes greater than 10%, and wetlands. These areas can be considered first for conservation. The township will have to discuss further methods to identify and purchase the land, but partnerships could be struck with area organizations whose missions are to conserve and preserve land. These organizations would include the Cleveland Metroparks, the Medina County Park District, Western Creek Conservancy, and Western Land Conservancy. So what we've done today is we've orchestrated the Cleveland Metroparks and Medina County Parks to be here tonight to offer information as to their parameters for donation and preservation of lands in Hinckley Township. This meeting is being recorded, so if folks can't be here in person or virtually, they can access it on our YouTube, or if you have a question in the future, certainly you can call me or watch the YouTube channel. So I will pass it off to you guys. If you each want to start with an introductions of who you are and who you represent, I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Zimmerman, the Chief Executive Officer of Cleveland Metroparks.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Kutzko, Real Estate Manager with Cleveland Metroparks.
I'm Kelly Kaufman, Principal Planner with Cleveland Metroparks.
I'm Nate Epping, the Director of Medina County Park District.
Kristen Trolio, Director of Grants for Cleveland Metroparks.
So again, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to have more of a, I think, a conversation, kind of a bigger picture conversation, not only about the partnerships that we formed with Medina most recently on a land acquisition, but really kind of where we're looking at in the future. And land conservation has been at the forefront of what Metroparks has brought to the table since 1917. The very first 3 acres were preserved in Rocky River. We've now grown to more than 24,000 acres that also include Medina Township or Hinckley Township in Medina County. It's always really interesting to explain how that came about. But if Stephanie, you want to advance the slide, it's really known, this particular area, Hinckley Reservation, is really known as the pendant from the Emerald Necklace. Again, we were created in 1917, 24,000 plus acres, 18 park reservations. We have land in 6 counties. So, as you know, land doesn't always know the geography of a township or the county. And so I think that's one of the very unique things, the 8 golf courses, the 5 nature centers, and most recently land acquisitions that include takeover of long-term lease holdings from the city of Cleveland and the state of Ohio that include Edgewater, Villa Angela, Euclid, and Wildwood. That's our founder, William Stinchcomb, really helping lay out. We had our Cleveland Hiking Club for many years as kind of the first forefront of looking at how we were mapping the park district. If you want to go to the next slide. Really, this is our 2nd century of stewardship. So we were founded in 1917. We're 105 years old. And each 10 years, we go through an exercise of really, where have we been and where are we going? And so the latest topics are conservation, conserving land, connecting people. And that's one of the things that we've really tried to pride ourselves on, is to provide new trail access. For those of you that know about the towpath, and Kelly will share some of that work that we're doing in the city of Solon, work that we just did a groundbreaking in the city of Euclid today on the Euclid Creek Greenway connector. Welcoming, we really want to talk about access for all and what does that mean, keeping the character of things in the various communities. engagement, really at a very high level. We have 19.6 million visitors yearly. And so how do we stay engaged? I would say during COVID, our park saw an increase over 20 million visitors. It was really the place to go. Sustainability, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, but fiscal sustainability and the environment sustainability, a lot of things we do revolve around what that ecosystem looks like, and then to be innovative and creative of how to solve problems for the future. So those are really, and our mission evolved, and it got very simple. And our last one was, I would say, very wordy and kind of hard to remember, but it's really about protecting nature, connecting communities, and inspiring conservation of the world is where it evolved into. And so the core goals are all around and evolved into that. And I won't go through all of that because, this conversation can be more in depth about, the land and some of the opportunities and partnerships that we can potentially look at in the future. So those are really kind of the opening remarks, and I will turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you. Well, thanks again for the invitation to come out and talk with you all. We just wanted to give a little bit of an update on some of the work that we are doing around Hinckley Reservation and in this area. And one of the things is looking at connectivity, as Brian mentioned. So the Cuyahoga Greenways Plan looks at trail connections, not only throughout Cuyahoga County, but also where we can kind of stitch together with our counterparts, surrounding Cuyahoga County. And so the graphic that you see right now are some of the kind of major trail routes. But as we've seen with the towpath and some other efforts, once we have that major spine, it's just a great resource for communities to build off of and really make a more robust system of trails. So we do have plans in the works to do a connectivity study with all the surrounding park districts that should be kicking off, sometime hopefully soon.
It actually should have kicked off already. I'll just be very frank. It should have been going, but it got stalled a little bit through COVID and some employee transitions through NOACA, which is the Northeast Ohio. They coordinate all of the funding. So congestion mitigation, air quality, a lot of the funds that we would use for trail connections, they want to do an overarching study. And so we've been pushing them as the heads of our park agencies to come up with this master plan that actually does really cohesively look at the 6-county area.
Great, thank you. And then some more, reservation specific projects. The Hinckley Dam has been studied over the past few years, and we actually have construction documents that are 95% complete to go in and make some repairs and, increase the structural capacity. We're finishing up the permitting process and some other coordination, but we think that construction on that will start in about 2 years. And then that period of construction, which does include some dredging along the south edge of the lake close to the boathouse, that's going to last over several seasons. So that'll be coming up. Thank you. Has anybody been out to the new Kiwanis shelter at the park? Okay, great. Well, we're really thrilled with what our in-house crews were able to achieve there. They took down kind of a rundown structure and replaced it with this great new facility. Has a lot of flexibility with some of those sliding panels and has been really well received by the community. Another more natural resource restoration focused project is Johnson's Creek, where the culvert was replaced, and then about 1,500 feet of stream corridor that had been really subject to a lot of heavy erosion. That was restored and we're kind of buttoning that back up. Ball field improvements have been another popular project where our crew again went in and made some, really nice improvements to build these new dugouts and just kind of give those ball fields a fresh look. And then, just a reminder that some of that behind the scenes work that really goes into keeping the park operating and in tip-top shape, just with, again, culvert replacements, paving projects. Our park manager, Ken Stray, is here tonight too. So, we're fully prepared to talk about any park-related questions that folks might have. So with that, I'll pass it to my colleague Steph.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the land and preservation opportunities. I'm in the real estate division, so that's kind of my focus. So this map, you can see the green is, the current property holdings that Cleveland Metroparks owns. And then highlighted in yellow are all the properties that we've acquired in the past 10 years. So from 2013 forward. So these properties represent about 2,200 acres we've acquired in 10 years. It's close to over 3,000 since Brian has been in leadership with Cleveland Metroparks. So the larger ones stand out, obviously. The Lakefront Reservation was a recent acquisition, but you can see these acquisitions span the entire park district from, the west to the south to the east. Some more significant ones near Bedford, you can see hopefully everyone can see my pointer. The yellow block, we acquired Astorhurst Golf Course with some Clean Ohio funding. And then when we have these large acquisitions, it often opens up opportunities to expand upon that. So we acquired Astor Golf Course, which is 127 acres, and then CEI owned another 88 acres just to the south. So once we, have an acquisition, sometimes we're able then to keep expanding from those acquisitions. Down in Brecksville, for example, another property that we acquired with Clean Ohio funds, we acquired with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. It was a partnership, and that was a 100-acre property. And then again, next door, Goodrich was selling some property. So in whole, this area was 150 acres. But really what I want to draw your attention to is the area of Hinckley. So you can see there's been a lot of effort in this area along the east branch of the Rocky River. The green circle here really represents the area of the township. So I just kind of wanted to give you a broader picture of some of our acquisitions over the years. In the last 5 years or so, we usually range about 200 and 250 acres a year that we acquire, and that's accomplished about 20 transactions a year. So just kind of wanted to place you within the entire park district, but we will, focus more on Hinckley Township and the East Branch of the Rocky River. So the map on the left here is actually taken from your comprehensive plan. You can see your township identified a greenway connection, which follows the East Branch of the Rocky River. And similarly, that has been, a push for us, a land preservation initiative as well. We had a study done around 2009 to look at the East Branch of the Rocky River, and the recommendations that really came out of that plan were to establish some core natural resource reserves along the East Branch of the Rocky River. So you can see that the East Branch of the Rocky River starts up here in our Brecksville Reservation. It continues down into Hinckley Township, and then it makes a turn here in Hinckley Reservation and continues north back to our Millstream Run Reservation. So this map illustrates the 600 acres that we've acquired along the East Branch of the Rocky River since 2010. So just to kind of place some of these properties, this was a 75-acre property that we were able to connect. You're here at Boston Road, and then you continue down into Medina County. We picked up some additional acreage along the Rising Valley Park area, and then you follow back up north, and we kind of created a core natural resource reserve area along River Road, and then along Ridge Road up here in more the North Royalton area. So just wanted to highlight that the East Branch of the Rocky River, Hinckley Township, Hinckley Reservation has been a big focus of Cleveland Metroparks over the last several years. More specifically, these are acquisitions that properties that we acquired in 2001, so just in the past year. These 3 acquisitions total nearly 175 acres. So just in the past year, we've acquired 175 acres along the East Branch of the Rocky River. So I'll start with the Utah property here, 52 acres. This is on River Road. We had formerly acquired the Olsowski Robb property, which was about 25 acres. And again, that thought of building upon properties that we already own to create larger core areas along the river for habitat and wildlife and plants and the whole bit. So the next property is the Williams property. We were funded through Clean Ohio to acquire both of these properties, both the Utah and the Williams property. That was a 75-acre acquisition. It was our largest property that we acquired in 2021, and it actually set Hinckley Reservation up over 3,000 acres. So it was a pretty valuable property, and continuing that preservation north of Boston Road. And then we also worked with Richfield Township. Cleveland Metroparks has been managing this portion of Rising Valley Park for a number of years, but Richfield Township had retained almost 45 acres just across the border. So we wanted more of a cohesive park. Richfield Township was really beginning to question the future use of the property, where the ball field being used, how they wanted to use it. And we really just approached them and said, why don't you donate it to Cleveland Metroparks? We'd rather have a cohesive park. There's a lot of Category 3 wetlands here at this park that are really high quality. And so we were able to work with Richfield Township to donate that property to us. So we use a variety of funding sources. Some is Clean Ohio, some is WRSP, which is the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. They've been a big funder of a lot of these acquisitions along the East Branch of the Rocky River over the years, and that's administered through the Ohio EPA. So getting a little more focused in specifically here in Hinckley Township, this red dotted border is your township boundaries. So you can see how Hinckley is situated within your township. Hinckley Reservation is our third largest reservation. As I mentioned earlier, it's just over 3,000 acres. Of that 3,000 acres, 2,900 acres are within Hinckley Township. So there's just a few properties in Hinckley Reservation that span into Richfield Township, but the primary, all of Hinckley Reservation is situated within your township. And it's just, it's a great reservation. Kelly mentioned a lot of the attractions, but obviously, Hinckley Lake is a big attraction, the different ledges, Whips Ledges, Warden Ledges. So I think we got the impression that there was some interest in learning a little bit more about how we protect land and what the process looks like. So we use a lot of different mechanisms for protecting property, and these circles highlight some of those options. So we do acquire property and fee. We also do long-term leases, and more recently we've been doing lease and management agreements for trail projects and that type of thing. We do conservation easements over property and trail easements. So an easement is where a landowner retains their property, but we have certain rights either for conservation purposes or to make connections through trails. And then lastly, there's term estates as well. Term estates could be a life estate so that you could choose to live on your property for the remainder of your days, or it could be a term that, I have grandkids, and in 10 years, I know I want to move south. Then at the end of 10 years, then the property would transfer to Cleveland Metroparks. So there's a number of ways to protect property. Those are just a few of them. And then obviously we have to prioritize, right? We can't protect everything as much as we would love to. So we have to see, with our budget, within our means, within certain grant sources, what is the best fit? So how does the property fit within plans? In the previous slides, I showed your comprehensive plan that showed the East Branch of the Rocky River. So we want to support plans like that where the community is suggesting this is where we want to see property preserved. Kelly mentioned the Cuyahoga County Greenways plans. We have our own strategic plan. So seeing how a potential property fits within those plans. We look for adjacency. So is the property close to Hinckley Reservation? Is it close to other protected land like Medina County Park District or Western Reserve Land Conservancy? Or is it in a corridor that we see a connection like we talked about with the East Branch of the Rocky River? And then what value does it add from a natural resource perspective? Are there a lot of streams, wetlands, floodplains, threatened plants or different type of species that are important for protection? And then partnerships, we'll talk a little bit about some of the partnerships we've had with NATE this past year. Other conservation agencies like West Creek Conservancy, Western Reserve Land Conservancy, the township like Richfield Township that I just highlighted. So we look for partners because it's always easier to do things together, pool our resources and our efforts. And then lastly, funding. So are we using our budget, which is, a set amount that we have, or are we going to stretch it? So we try to go after grant funds as much as possible to maximize what we can protect, as well as donations. And donations can come in so many different ways. It can come from a township, it can come from private landowners, it can come from, foundations or just interested community members that want to see something protected. So those are all important things. It can be part of your estate planning process if you have a property that you want to protect. So lots of different options for protection. We're always here to vet new properties and see if they're a good fit for us. And in the event that they're not, then we also work with our partners to kind of feed properties to who can be the best person in the end. So this is, outside of the area of Hinckley Township, but I just wanted to give it as an example. So this is along the stretch of our South Chagrin Reservation in Moreland Hills. We had worked with a property owner, Howard Kasdan was his name, and he had picked up his side yard property that the city of Moreland Hills was selling, and it had a deed restriction that you couldn't build on it. He had no use for it. So he reached out to us close to the end of the year. He was a local business owner and saw some benefit to donating the property as a charitable donation to us, because he really only purchased it, just to have it in his control so that he could have the property protected and not develop next to him. So that was in 2015. We maintained a nice relationship with him, and he kind of mentioned, if my kids don't want to stick around, I might want to donate my whole property to you at some point in time. His business grew. He chose to stay in Moreland Hills. However, I think he realized the value of the protection of the land. So he is on Skyline Drive in Moreland Hills. He had 2 acres kind of up top of the ridge of the Chagrin River, but owned, 7.2 acres. The river you can see in this picture really just goes around the edge of his property. So what he chose to do was to split off the rear 7 acres. We did a lot split and a consolidation, and then we were able to, incorporate that 7 acres through his donation into South Chagrin Reservation. So that's just one example that, properties can be donated outright in their entirety. We can split off rear acreage and combine them with our park. They can put a conservation easement on it, a life estate, all those different options. So lastly, before I hand this over to Nate, I just wanted to highlight our most recent acquisition in Hinckley Township, which we just acquired earlier this year in 2022. Nate approached us. He had an owner, Mrs. Oldfield, that had a significant amount of property, both north and south of Ledge Road. So generally, Ledge Road divides the county line, right? So Medina County, Hinckley Township, and then where Medina County Park District works. So Nate approached us knowing we traditionally hold property in Hinckley Township. So, excuse me, we were able to put in a grant to Clean Ohio, and we acquired, Cleveland Metroparks acquired nearly 6 acres north of Ledge Road. And more impressively, Medina County Park District was able to acquire over 100 acres south of Ledge Road. So it was a great opportunity to work with one landowner, 2 park districts. It was over a $2 million project that we received funding for. So just a great win for both park districts and the community.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah.
So again, I'm Nate Epping, the Director of Medina County Park District. A lot of similarities between what they're doing and ways to conserve land, similarities with Medina County Park District. We're much smaller, and I tell people the reason we're not here in Hinckley is because Cleveland Metro Parks got here first. They were established in 1917. We were established in 1965. So we're in our 57th year, whereas they're in their 2nd century of conservation. We have hit the 8,300 acre mark, so we're about 1/3 the size of Cleveland Metro Parks. We have 50 different trails, and of course, our real estate tax is assessed in every community except for Hinckley Township. That one levy brings in roughly $4.9 million, and it's most of what it takes to run the park district. We also have relied heavily on a lot of grants for land acquisition, restoration, and trail construction in the last few years. So next slide. Our mission is really about these 4 things. It's about quality of life, education, conservation, and the protection of natural resources. I have defined my purpose a little more simply. Next slide, please. And this is, I think, the goal of Medina County Park District here for the next few years. We're trying to preserve what people love about Medina County. Plain and simple. People move here or want to stay here because of the open space. They like the farmland, they like the parks, they like the woods and the meadows. And if any one entity or any 2 entities are going to preserve land here in Medina County to save what people love about it, I think it's Medina County Park District, and here in Hinckley, it's Cleveland Metro Parks. So next slide. So this year, we didn't plan it this way, but this has really turned out to be a banner year for us. By December, the end of December, we'll have acquired 683 acres this year. That includes a 203 acre donation in Westfield Center and Westfield Township. That's our largest donation to date. And just since 2019, I've been the director since October of 18, and I like to challenge myself and see where we can take things. So just in the last 4 years, we have preserved and acquired nearly 1,200 acres. We do that through grants and donations as well. Large donations like the 203 acres, all the way down to donations of 6 or 7 acres. We look at things strategically. The Cleveland Metroparks collaboration for the property that we're referring to in-house as Allerdale North was a huge win for us and a great way to collaborate. At the end of the day, the seller got her asking price, and Medina County Park District, with help from Cleveland Metroparks, used Clean Ohio funding to pay most of that sale price. So we acquired 105 acres across the street from Hinckley Reservation for less than $20,000. Unbelievable, because the balance was picked up by that grant. So that's a deal that we would take any day. Next slide. So like Cleveland Metroparks, we've got some criteria. We're looking for land that is adjacent to existing parks, land that can get us into some new communities. In Medina County, there are some areas where we don't own land or lease land yet. Earlier this year, we entered into a lease with the city of Wadsworth for Holmesbrook Park because we didn't have an open presence in the city limits. And Holmesbrook is a 58-acre natural area park. It's a birding hotspot. So now we've got a 50-year lease to manage Holmesbrook as a Medina County Park District location. We're looking for land to make connections for bike trails, just riparian corridors, trying to preserve land that can allow us to connect different community assets. We bought one of my first purchases as director was for land in Lafayette Township that will one day allow us to connect a bike trail to the Medina County University Center. That's the Medina home of the University of Akron. So connections are really important to us. And really, we focus on the resource-rich properties, the woods, the wetlands, the swamps that developers don't want. We'll take them. Those are very important. Again, comes back to quality of life. Next slide. So we'd be happy to accept donations of land. We've received a lot of donations in our history. Some of our busiest and most beloved parks, Allerdale Park in Granger, the Schleyman Nature Preserve, which is adjacent to Buckeye Woods, Mugridge Park in Granger Township, which has an awesome accessible playground and a dog park. Those all stemmed from significant donations of land. But we've also benefited greatly from discounted sales, especially when we want to leverage a grant. So the Clean Ohio program is one that we've used a lot. That Oldfield property in Granger that Stephanie talked about, the appraised value was closer to $2 million. The seller wanted to sell to the park district, was not in a position to give it away, but wanted to sell to the park district because she wanted to see it preserved. So she discounted the sale by about $500,000. And that gift counted towards our local contribution on the grant application. And based on percentages, you can earn extra points through Clean Ohio. So that is another way that we're able to acquire land and leverage our local tax dollars. I'm not a tax professional. It's one of the reasons I work in the parks world. Financial planning is not my strong suit, but we have had donors who have gifted land to us, and they've done so over several years to maximize the tax benefits. So getting a tax benefit for a donation, it's between the donor, or in the case of a discounted sale, the seller and their tax professionals, their attorneys, but we are gladly, we work with those people. And for a lot of folks, it's a chance to leave a legacy. So in our park district, we do have parks and preserves named after individuals, named after families. And that is a privilege or a perk that's always been reserved for people who have donated land. In other instances, like the Oldfield property, she was not in a position to donate the property, but she wanted to, in part, leave a legacy and sell it to a conservation-based organization like ours. So those are some of the ways that we acquire land. We're starting to consider conservation easements like Cleveland Metroparks. I recently had someone reach out to me who's got close to 100 acres in the county and wants to consider her options and see that it's preserved in perpetuity. And that could give us some advantages for making connections and building trails and whatnot. So we're a couple decades behind Cleveland Metroparks, but we're like-minded, and we're looking to preserve what we can to say what people love about Medina County.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you guys are here. I say every meeting how excited I am that you guys are coming. I tell people pop popcorn and come on up. Does anyone in the audience have any questions they'd like to ask while we've got both entities here?
I'm gonna ask my question.
Okay.
My husband was talking a lot about donating our property at 40 acres up on 303 near State. It's not near anything you guys have. And there's a little bit of an access issue because it's a dangerous ingress. Is that something you guys would consider? We do have a wetland, little swampy area. It's all wooded. Are you looking for land acquisition if it's not related or not adjacent? I guess is my question.
I think the highest and best answer I can give you is, as a conservation agency, we will look at all pieces of land, and we always want to honor the wishes of the sellers. But we also look very strategically as to, does it fit within the master plan and the confines of what we're doing? I would also say that, we map out many, many years. And so there's buy and hold strategies as well. Do we see a connection? Do we see a partnership with the township, or do we see a partnership with another like-minded agency that can take something and pull it into something else? So all of those things really roll into our criteria of where we're at. And I think that's why we've been successful. And that's why we forge partnerships with other park districts. We work with Lake Metroparks, Geauga, Summit, and Lorraine as well. So those are really good things. So the short answer is yes, we would love to sit down and understand exactly what does it look like.
There was another question back here.
Grant money. You guys talked about that. Where do you typically get your grant money?
Kristen?
You want me to answer? Sure. We, as Nate mentioned, we get a lot of grant funding from the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, which is a program of the Ohio Public Works Commission. So it's state money that is then delegated to different districts throughout the state. So Cuyahoga County is a district, and then Medina County is a district along with Lorraine County. So the criteria is really conservation minded. So they look at things like the natural resources value, what kind of species protection you have there for plants and for animals. Public access, what kind of public access will it be looking at? And if you're going to be doing any restoration on the land. So that's probably, I think, the biggest one for both of our organizations, if I can speak for you too, Nate, I believe so. We also look at the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal program that's administered by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and their main focus is public access and recreation. So a little bit of a different focus. Ohio EPA has one called the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program. And a lot of the properties that were shown along the East Branch of the Rocky River corridor were acquired through those funding. And that is looking at really, really high quality natural areas. So category 3, which is the highest quality wetlands and or high quality stream corridors. And then we've looked at other sources too. There's one called NACA, or the North American Wetland Conservation Act, that looks at wetlands as the name implies. Am I forgetting any? Those are kind of most of our acquisition sources.
The H2 Ohio program
Yeah.
is another one that my park district, Medina County Park District, has really benefited from. We have 3 H2 Ohio projects, over $3 million over those 3 projects to restore and enhance wetlands. And the one project was to actually purchase land for that purpose. That's been a great resource for us as well.
And that's a relatively newer initiative of Governor DeWine. And so he's been really focusing on water quality and wetlands and stream corridors being one piece of that.
Yep.
I think just as a caveat, each one of those programs comes with restrictions that come with them. So there are only so many things that if you choose to use that fund or funding source, it comes with caveats of what the property can be used for or what it should be used for. So it's, you have to be very careful as to how you're using the funds depending on what your strategy is.
You poll the areas to see what they would like. essentially then too? So it's gonna be them that's affected, right? So if one of those entities requires, something that is gonna affect the environment of the area, would you talk to those people and then maybe seek another route if they weren't on board with it? Or?
I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, the strategies that we've had, like the Heron Rookery in North Royal, I mean, there was a very strategic strategy that was deployed there with council and with the mayor's support in preserving the land. And so, that's, a nesting area. So I will tell you, of all the transactions, each one of them has its own dynamics and opportunities. And, I would say in general, we have a very good relationship with all of the mayors. And so we have conversations not only with them, but with landowners as well. And then we really look at what is the best long-term use of the property if it's in stewardship. If you think of the first 3 acres and now it's 105 years later, it's lived up to that. I mean, Rocky River Reservation has grown into one of the busiest, it is the busiest reservation of the Metroparks.
Can I, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna add to that, I think I know a lot of folks in the township want to keep Hinckley rural, but a lot of these programs are talking about help that aspect of it. Like, they do not allow for development. You can't build buildings on it. You can't pave massive parking lots on it. So a lot of the programs we're talking about are all conservation minded. So like, you can't develop the property. You can
never go.
You can do small pavilions, you could do small parking spaces or parking lots to accommodate that park. You can do a lot of natural surface trails, but you can't build a ice skating rink and a bunch of baseball diamonds and all of that in a lot of these grant sources. Not all of them, but a lot of the ones that we usually use are conservation minded.
The EPA's WRRSP program, not a fan of bridle trails or mountain bike trails. That one is really restrictive. The Clean Ohio program in advance of applications, I know on the partner application that we combined on was we both sought resolutions from Medina County commissioners, and the program itself requires the sponsoring agency, Cleveland or Medina, to communicate in advance with the local township or village their intent to purchase the property. Clean Ohio doesn't like playgrounds, and really development is secondary. It's about preserving that natural area.
So from what you're telling me, what I understand is you take each property and you kind of build the plan from the ground up based on what it is, what you want to do there. And then maybe you look at one of these entities and figure out what's going to work best for you in that area. And then it kind of builds up from there.
Essentially, yes.
So like, how about like Nowaka? How much do you get it down?
Are you saying NOACA, the Northeast Ohio Regional?
Yeah.
I would say weekly is probably the answer. I mean, they're the planning agency for this region. I forget how many counties it is, but it's fairly, yeah, it's all the surrounding counties. And so they I would say administer and govern most of the funds that come through these sources for trails and others. So they are a very important part of funding strategies to the park districts.
And they have a pretty strict set of caveats as well with their money.
Most of their money, they actually don't have money. They actually are the intermediary between the federal government and state governments to push money into the region for purposes of recovery. Yes.
They have our money and then they give it back to us under their conditions. So,
That's a way of saying it, yes.
so they're not very friendly. A lot of their moves, everything that they're trying to do is to get personal vehicle use at a minimum. And that's the idea of a lot of bike lanes, right?
I mean, I can't speak to what their strategy is in all the counties.
And generally in this area, the push with a lot of the bike lanes is to get people out of their cars and get people using those modes of transportation. So I'm just curious how, I lived in Cleveland for a while. I started watching a lot of these bike lanes pop up out of nowhere. A lot of 2-lane roads turning 1-lane roads. It started making traffic an issue. Again, we're going to do some bike lanes in the streets and we're going to have bike lanes in the metro parks. My question is how do we plan on supplementing with bike lanes and somewhere where you can really only ride a bike maybe 9 months out of the year? How can we supplement all that transit? what's the answer, I guess? Are you gonna allow more than just bicycles on the bike paths? Are you gonna allow, I see a lot of like e-bikes and stuff like that on these paths?
Yeah, I mean, e-bikes are bikes. I mean, I mean, I cannot speak to, supplement. Are you talking about supplementing in monetary, or I don't exactly understand?
I guess they're gonna supplement a method of transportation, right? They're trying to get people out of the cars and get people another way to transport themselves. So the bike lanes are always advertised as a way to get to work or a way to travel without having to get in your car and go do that. I work in Cleveland. I live out here. I have made the trek on my bicycle to work before. It's taken me about 2 hours, but I enjoy that kind of stuff, right? I'm just trying to figure out how feasible it is for a lot of people to make those treks without having some kind of assisted bike.
Yeah, I mean, I think the statement that we made early in the presentation, NOACA's wishes under the leadership of Grace Galucci was to take all of the counties and plan critical gaps and opportunities for the futures. And so we have been consulted to a certain degree, but it hasn't gotten to that next level yet. So as roads are rebuilt or opportunities present themselves, I think that's what they have to take a look at in the character of the counties that they're also serving. And so they also do roads and bridges, and they do a lot of other things as well. So I wish I could comment more on where that plan is actually at, because that's really going to help guide not only park districts, but municipalities through this region. The other component is that Kelly mentioned the Cuyahoga County Greenway Plan is probably one of the few counties in the country that have actually mapped to the degree that they have. And why that's so strategically important is because that will help set forth guidelines and funding opportunities in ways that trails are actually ready to be put in certain areas. Go ahead.
In regard to the Hinkley Dam project, you mentioned that you're going to be doing a lot of dredging around the boathouse. And that's so popular with this area. The renovation of that was a few years back, was really beautiful in there. And this is very welcoming area. People launch kayaks out of there, and it's lovely. So during this period, do you have any idea at this point whether the boathouse will remain open and people will still be able to kayak? And can you talk maybe a little bit more about the project?
I think from the very highest level, it was interesting. The park district's wishes are to really, there's a number of components that are tied to the Hinkley Lake Dam. Number one is they're actually regulated by agencies and actually insured to a certain degree. They also have to fall under FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Plans. And so there were a number of steps that the Cleveland Metroparks took to make sure all of those components were taken care of. Having said that, the design of this and the permitting of this is probably one of the hardest things we've ever done. I mean, it's an impoundment, it's the confluences, the rivers coming together that we've, manually man-made, created by us. And so we're going to have to continue to work through the permitting process of the Army Corps. We're going to have to follow the regulations. We're also going to look at depths. And I think from what I would call a closure/inconvenience time, we're trying to figure out the best ways to do that. And when you look at opportunities versus expense, where can the dredge material be moved to, and what soils can be brought in to actually reline? And so 2 projects that we've done most recently were in North Chagrin, Strawberry Pond, and we also just have most recently, we're almost probably 80% of the way through Garfield Park Reservation. Now, much smaller. I mean, we're only talking a few acres, but the concept we've proven that it can work, but we hope to keep the material close and on site. And depending on how deep or how far back we need to go, how far it's silted in will dictate how long the lake is actually going to be drained. So the lake will need to be drained. We'll need to determine how viable is the material to move, meaning is it jello? Is it pudding? Or is it a little bit more firm? And I'm just being, I mean, those aren't technical terms, but that's essentially what will be moving from the area. And it's really, east of the boathouse, the area where the sediment has filled itself in. And so, we really want to see it. It was explained to me that it should last about 100 years, and it's about 100 years. And so we're in that process of, our goal is not to inconvenience the guests. It is one of the most beloved parts of it. So that's why we've been working very hard to make sure all of the components are in play, and then really understanding the rainfall patterns of how to and when to get the contractor's already been chosen. And so they've been working with us to keep the cost down as best we possibly can. And unfortunately, we have not found a funding source, not one single funding source, to actually help with this infrastructure. Out of all the things we've done in my tenure, this has been one of the hardest to find any help from any government agency. So we all of us will bear the cost to redo that for the next 100 years. And so the support of issue 10 here in Hinckley Township and the support of issue 5 will help dictate that project.
Will the, while the dredging and all that is going on, will the lower lake swimming and bathing area remain open? I know, it's a real hard question to answer, but you have any feel for that?
I'm guessing no. And the only reason I'm saying that is that the lake will have to be drawn down to a certain level. Now, I do not know exactly how, because it hasn't been designed yet, how we're going to account for the flow. What we did in Garfield is we were able to put it in a containment system and actually bring it offline to be able to work. Now, having said that, that is not going to be the case here. So we will probably, having seen these projects before in other parts of the country, we may have to dig a channel to keep it in a channel while we're working in certain areas. And we may have to move material to actually create a small dam to keep the water on one side. So none of those things have been determined at this point in time yet, but we'll share all of those as they come forward, because it'll be one of the biggest projects we've done.
And that's going to start now. When do you say that start?
We're projecting in 24, just based on the work that we've had to do to this point. We are still hopeful that
More grant opportunity.
there's one more out there. I mean, this is a $7 million project. And so it's a large project. It's to and include the dam, the concrete dam structure. It also includes the earthen dam that would be on the east side of it. That area would need to be taken down and off, and either roller concrete, they call it. So you take the soil off, you put concrete down into, and then you cover that back up. And so if you've seen in Michigan, those are a few of the incidents where levees have breached. They breach because of the soil side of it. Our soil is very stable, but having said that, it's time to do the dredge and bring it to modern standards. It also needs a level of insurability at that point in time as well.
So you're doing a little bit of soil testing, and a lot of how you're going to handle that depends on what you find
That is correct.
in the dredging process.
We have a pretty good idea right now, but until you actually, take it all down and go through it. So we're fairly confident we have the right answers.
But it shouldn't affect the trails above it.
Yes and no. There will be haul roads that will be coming out that we'll be coordinating with Ken from, trail open and trail closed, depending on certain times of day. Each contractor that we've worked with, I would say almost all of them love parks as well. So they want to keep the trails open. So we'll see what it looks like and the timing of it. Depending on when the season is, is the ground firm? There are a lot of unanswered questions yet, but as we continue to get closer, we'll keep the township and the folks in.
A few years ago, maybe it's probably 7, 8 years ago, you let down the pool on Hinckley Lake, I think to find out where the high spots were that might need dredging. And I know you test the valve maybe every year.
More than that.
Let down the pool and in testing the valve, and then close the valve, you completely stop and please don't take this as criticism, but the flow of the east branch of the Rocky River completely stopped until the rain began, which was very unhealthy for the stream itself. So please consider that, to keep some flow going so that stream stays alive.
We certainly take that into consideration. Having said that, we're under strict mandates of exercising the dam valve. And so certain times of year when there's less rainfall, less water is coming down, and which we obviously, if we controlled the weather, we would be in probably a different business. But having said that, we try our hardest to make sure that it can continue, but we don't control all of those things, and we have certain regulations that we have to follow. So it's understood and not taken the wrong way.
This is a question that's kind of pretty addressed to the whole panel. And I realize that your mission statements are similar, just different size organizations between the Metroparks and the Medina County Park System. But as a landowner, if you wanted to consider donating a property, how would you recommend they approach or decide which one of those we ought to go to? In other words, let's say you have a property, you're thinking about donating it, you just need to decide which organization might be the better way to select.
You root for the little guy, right? The underdog over here.
Yeah, I mean,
So I guess at this stage, there are other conservation easement organizations. What would you recommend a landowner do?
I think from the highest level, I think you've worked with Western Reserve, if I'm not mistaken, Western Reserve Land Conservancy. Yeah.
Easement on my property.
Yeah, and so we partner with Western Reserve, we partner with West Creek, we partner with Medina. I would say uniquely Hinckley Township in Medina County has historically stayed with Cleveland Metroparks because of the tax collection and our ability to continue and improve property. So that's historically the way it's been. And I would say it's more of a handshake agreement that we've continued that. We do the same very uniquely in Lake County. A good portion of North Chagrin Reservation sits in Lake County. And some of this was mapped before the boundaries actually, they evolved. And so I would say west and mostly west of the boundaries in Lake County, that historically has stayed with Cleveland Metroparks. And so we've had conversations as properties come up, who is best suited. So we actually keep a very open line of communication, and not all properties fit the mission and goals of the agencies. And so, we do work with West Creek and Parma, and they're in other communities. And so all I can tell you is that, it's mostly the private landowners' wishes that, will and should be respected.
Nate, what do you think about it?
Well, I would echo what Brian says, and something that we need to consider is, as a much smaller organization, our operations, our day-to-day operations are located in one place, a little southwest of the city of Medina. I've been approached probably by 2 or 3 landowners in Hinckley in my time as director, and I've talked to them, and in 2 cases, I actually walked the properties, and I think I let someone at Cleveland know about the one, and my kind of unwritten for minimum size for a standalone location is about 30 acres. We would be happy to look at a smaller property depending on the resources. If there's, an endangered plant of some kind, or a neat geological feature like a cave, or, so we could stray from that 30-acre unwritten minimum. But we also need to consider how far we might be traveling to actively or even passively manage certain properties too.
It seemed like Ledge Road was sort of dividing money between you 2 organizations.
It always has been.
Reservation was
Yep.
north and you were south.
Right.
Is that blurring now from the standpoint you'd be looking at other areas, and why, for instance, would a landowner want to come to you?
Sure.
As opposed to you?
Well, I can tell you, we're not actively acquiring any other land outside of the township of Hinckley.
Yeah. And really, as Brian said, it's up to the landowner's wishes.
I didn't quite hear that.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland Metroparks' goal is to stay within the boundaries of Hinckley Township and Medina County.
Hinckley Township?
Yeah.
Okay, Metroparks is a lot larger. I mean, but you're saying that you would, I guess I'm not understanding quite your answer.
Well, if you're talking specifically this area, then our goal is to stay within the footprint of the township, of which the taxing authority had been granted, 70, 80 years ago. So that's what we will continue to do.
Let's say that I wanted to donate more land that I have. and I'm not sure that I want to donate to the same organization or not. If I look at more, I'm just wondering, would your organization be one to approach, or would Nate's be one to approach, or would I go to a land conservancy? I mean, I've done this with Western Reserve. There are other land conservancies, but I'm not just wanting to put, let's say, a conservation easement on it. I want to donate. Now, what's the recommended procedure that you have to kind of choose between these?
Well, we're not choosing, to be very frank. The landowner is choosing, not.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
we're,
How do we assess this?
well, you would assess it yourself, what you would like to do. I mean, that's not for us to decide as an agency. And so I know you've worked and talked with Stephanie before, you've worked with Rich Cochran and his group. So, it's really on your purposes of preserving your land. So, you've worked with Western Reserve before, you can continue to work with them. There's nothing stopping you from doing those things.
The conservation easement is a different thing than from a donate. You
Correct.
Take a look at it.
Mhm.
What you want. You can preserve the land by just putting an easement on it
Correct.
and still own it.
Yes.
If you want to donate it, then you have to make a decision which organization is going to support you the best, probably, or you're going to get the best benefit from that.
What I can say is that if you'd like to meet with us, we will gladly sit down with you again.
Okay, and I gather that, what would you offer to say you would rather have a person come to you, anybody, not just me, and donate land, let's say the 30 minimum acres that you want to look at. They could go to the Metroparks.
Sure.
But how does a landowner have the information that he needs to have to say, I think maybe it would be better to go there?
Well, we're not competing. We're actually after the same thing. We want to preserve resource-rich properties. They have Cleveland Metroparks has a much larger park district and a much bigger budget. But at the end of the day, if a property in a critical area is preserved, I don't care who preserves it. It could be Western Reserve or West Creek or Cleveland Metroparks or Medina County Park District. If someone in this room or someone watching on YouTube were to have the idea of donating, let's say 30 acres, and they called me, I'd talk to them and I'd kind of describe the park district and maybe look at it on the GIS system as we're on the phone and ask about the property. But I'd let them know too that historically we've not gone north of Ledge Road and want to know why they called us and make sure that they have a chance to talk to Cleveland Metroparks too. Again, we're not competing. If anything, we're able to partner in some unique ways that often surprises people, like that acquisition, but the 105 acres for us in Granger and the 5 or 6 acres in Hinckley Township. That was a win for both of us.
You got a question?
Oh, yes. When a person goes to donate land to your parks, whether it's conservation or outright giving, would the person making the donation have any say in what is done in the future once Metro or Medina comes over? Say that person would say, well, I would like at least to have some picnic area there, or I would like or not like to have trails for hikers go through there. How do you approach that sort of thing? I mean, obviously nothing big or grand, but maybe the person says, I don't want my land that I'm donating to have any pass through it. Once you donate the land, is it then up to the park what they decide to do with it? How much does the donor have to say about the future use of that?
Well, if I may, I'll use the example of our 203 acre donation.
Yes.
I've been talking with the owner for about 2 years. And finally, after lots of surveys and legal descriptions and different things, we successfully transferred the property to the park district in July of this year. She knew coming in what our purpose is and what our mission is all about. We're not currently Medina County Park District. We don't have any golf courses. We don't have a zoo. We're a much smaller organization, natural area parks. We have parks and preserves, and there's differences between them. And the way she described her property sounded more like her wishes were for it to remain or to become a preserve. So not necessarily asphalt trails, but an accessible limestone, compacted gravel loop trail, natural surface trails through the woods, a picnic shelter, things that are very much within our scope. So we have been working with her on developing the concept plan. And per that pledge agreement, we promised to begin the public access developments by the summer of '24. So we intend to go after a couple of grants. We're looking at the Land and Water Conservation Fund to help fund part of that. Another donation of land that we're working with a family on the concept plan for the property, and they've expressed an interest in helping to donate to kickstart development. But we wouldn't take on a donation of land that was too restrictive in that it wouldn't allow us to consider public access unless the topography and other ecological challenges kind of prohibited doing so. But we also wouldn't take on a donation of land or consider purchasing land if the intent was to build something or get into a quote unquote business that is not within our mission.
That's okay. It's pretty much you'll work with the donor and look at typical uses.
Correct. Right.
Back to your southern border of Ledge Road and your northern border where the two parks come together. I've attended quite a few of the monthly Metropark board meetings, and I found it interesting, but not fully able to understand the discussion on crossing Interstate 271. Could you briefly comment on that?
You know something we don't know?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so, I mean, the very interesting thing is when you're working with federal highways, it's not an easy thing to accomplish. Having said that, we take on very challenging projects. And so, I think the wishes, it comes down to time and money. And, when we try to very strategically understand through conversations with ODOT District 12 and the federal government of when roads will be rebuilt, and then when are there opportunities to add infrastructure. An example in Cleveland is Tiedemann Road, right off of 480. The sidewalks are actually more narrow than this table on both sides. I've biked it many times and it's scary, to be very frank. And so the wish is that when the bridge deck gets rebuilt, please put all of the sidewalk on one side and try to get a minimum of 10 feet. Now, having said that, 271, it's a super highway, right? And so, it's over or under. And so it's just a matter of that. And we have not addressed that at this point in time, and nor I don't believe Medina has. Having said that, we have the want at some point in time to connect. And what that looks like yet, we don't know.
We've talked about a potential for an at-grade crossing from essentially Judge's Lake to our property that we recently purchased in April of this year, the 105 acres. But we won't be developing that property at least until 2026. We have a number of projects on the drawing board right now. We're moving soil on 2 projects this week. So we've got a lot already that we've promised. And that's one that's got to be, properly vetted through the design and engineering stage.
Thank you. Back to donation
Yep.
questions.
Anyone else? Any questions, comments?
Another question that has nothing to do with donation. If you don't mind. So the future land use map is what we're talking about. We're talking about the greenway connections. My understanding that's Cuyahoga County, or that's the Metroparks, the greenway connection.
I'll let Kelly answer that.
The most kind of comprehensive look at where trails and greenways could occur took place in a Cuyahoga County-based plan, but there's the intention to we're always talking with our neighboring park districts about where a point of connection could occur, whether it's Medina or Summit or Lake, where are those corridors that might have natural resource value and also potential transportation link. And so that better understanding of those linkages will take place in that more regional study that NOACA is funding. But that study hasn't kicked off yet. When it does, it will definitely include a public engagement component. So we'll have meetings and open houses in the various areas to help inform the plan and what so we can be responsive and that plan can be responsive to what people want to see.
Mhm.
So
How often is eminent domain used? Let's say that you start to get a couple swaths of land, or you find a space to use. And you can look right here. It's interesting because we're talking about rezoning the area that's right at the corner of Hinkley Hills and Ellis right now. Our zoning commission is talking about rezoning that. But let's say you start getting some swaths of land together and you need a couple more to make your path. Do you ever employ the use of eminent domain?
In my tenure, we have not.
Is that something that like NOACA would do and then kick it back into a conservancy or something?
They are an intermediary of funds. They don't own or control land.
I'll give you an eminent domain success story. We've used it once in my 4 years with Medina County Park District. And that's because when we bought the former Chippewa Lake Amusement Park of roughly 95 acres, there was a little sliver of land that was owned by CSX Railroad that bisected the property. And CSX is based in Florida, and they wanted $218,000 per acre for this little property. And I shared with them what I paid for the amusement park, said we'd offer the same amount. We had it surveyed, and it was 1.39 acres, and they wanted 218,000 per acre. So at one point, we even offered more than the amusement park price. We are offered in the $50,000 range per acre, and they said no. So eminent domain in that case was used as a tool to get them to the bargaining table. At the end of the day, they started at 218 per acre, and we paid them $12,000 total to acquire that property. So we can build a bike trail and hiking and walking trails through the former amusement park property. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to make some of those connections. But it's used very infrequently. I think the park district in its 57 years has used it twice. And it's never the taking of land. It's paying the fair market value for a critical piece of land like the CSX property. And we could have really justified, its use in that instance.
There actually are friendly uses of it as well, where families that are partners in properties won't necessarily agree. So there are actually very unique ways. It's a lot of times it has a negative, but there are actually very good stories and Nate just gave one of them, of actually how it works to the benefit because it sets the appropriate value.
And-
So, please.
Well, I was just going to circle back to the planning. And I think it's important to say, even with that Cuyahoga Greenways countywide trail plan, there are multiple right answers to a lot of those trail routes. And those right answers deal with working with willing sellers, fitting it to a roadway project or capacity, that it's best suited for. So I think it's kind of a mix that we try to have flexibility and make a plan work to meet the intent, not so much always be, with one specific solution in mind.
Even people who love parks and love trails sometimes get a little nervous when they see a plan. And I like to tell them there are lines on a page.
Mhm.
We're looking at the connection first. What's possible? What do people want? Then we can find the direct route. It can be a utility corridor. It can be a railroad right of way or an abandoned railroad line, widening sidewalks. It's a number of things that we could look into.
You can adapt it, okay.
Yep.
Because what I'm looking at, I guess, is there's a couple projects that are going on right now. There's the Irish Town Bend project that you have going in Cleveland. That there was, I want to call it failed project, but it kind of stalled the project over in Edgewater on Lake Avenue. They were looking to expand the sidewalks there to make bike trails. And then the Solon bike trail, the rails, I think that's kind of what you're saying, the rails to the trail. So I guess my concern is this, okay? When you're looking at this, I think the Irontown Bend one that completed the Centennial Trail to the lakefront. And that was a big deal for you guys. You worked with Nowaka on every one of those instances except the solar one. And it was an integral part, like I said. So when there was a little bit of resistance, maybe by residents that were unsure how it was going to go, definitely in solar, when they started putting the bike path behind their house, they felt like they might be in danger of their families, with all that traffic behind there and possibly the lights for the path. In Edgewater, people were nervous about having a bike-sized path in their front yard with people possibly traveling 25 miles an hour on an e-bike through their front yard as they're trying to back out of the driveway, right? These are all really viable concerns that the community is going to have. And I know that this isn't you guys, but in the media, anyone that voiced any concern about that was absolutely dismissed. They were slandered. They were debased. I mean, it was really shameful the way that they treated some of these people that were just trying to speak up in a meeting, because you guys do have such a great, you have a stellar reputation. And anyone that comes out and speaks in criticism of it, of a plan, immediately get piled on. So I guess all I'm worried about is just everyone getting a fair shake. But what you're saying is there's nothing set in stone about a certain path that it needs to go. Everyone's willing to work with something that is the least resistance to the community. And that reassures me. I just want everyone to kind of be respectful of everybody. And again, I know that's not you guys, but it's what happens in society now. If you're not on board, if you're not part of the majority, the media is going to dump on you. And I watched it happen in 3 instances. So that's my point. That's all.
I live across the street from the farmer's one, and there's the gate, okay? Somebody this week put up signs on the gate, says you can't park or anything in front of the gate. Well, I usually park my car there when it's snowing really bad. You have to wait for my husband to get the plow out, plow the driveway. Will I get a ticket or anything? That will happen because I parked my car there until it could be 7, 8 o'clock at night coming home because the driveway didn't get plowed yet. What, am I in violation? I mean, yeah, my car is going to be there, and there, it could be at times, it's there.
Call Ken.
You live on, did you say Kellogg Road?
Right across the street.
Okay, yeah, that's how all the gates, including Metroparks, are gonna actually have that same design on them. And it's mostly a safety thing of the gates need to be accessible by the staff and everything. So they're having no parking signs put up there because we really don't want people parking in front of the gates. We do have a parking lot just down the road from there that you could utilize. That's,
Yeah, but sometimes I don't have my boots on. I just have my tennis shoes on.
I would say that if you're just parking there during a heavy snow event, I really don't think you're going to have too much to worry about. It's mostly we don't want the gate being blocked if we need to get access back there.
And I have seen it where there's a car in front of that gate because that's where they parked and they got out and took a walk or something. I've seen that this year. Okay.
Anyone else? Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm again so grateful for you taking the time out to be here. And if anyone has any questions, do you have business cards or what's the best way to reach you? Is it going to be through me? Just for future reference.
I know I have a couple.
Yeah, I have some too. We can share
Yeah.
for sure.
Perfect. So if you guys have any, without any further questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting and you certainly can approach our members of the Cleveland Metroparks and Medina County Park System and see if maybe you can have further contact with them on your own. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.